Hey everybody, welcome to Foundation. Today we have a great episode for you talking to Tony Hsieh. Tony was the founder of LinkExchange. He later went on to fund Zappos and then became CEO of Zappos. And he's probably my go-to guy when it comes to talking about all things related to building company culture. He has a great book out there called Delivering Happiness. Also, if you want to check out more episodes of Foundation, go to foundation.kr. Let's go talk to Tony. So tell me, where did you grow up?
I was born in Illinois, but moved to the Bay Area when I was 5, I think. Grew up in Marin County, and yeah, been in the Bay Area most of my life, and moved to Vegas. Wow, I guess it's been almost 9 years, and been in Vegas ever since.
So when you were in the Bay Area, you went to school out there. Mm-hmm. Where'd you go to college?
Went to Harvard out in Boston, and it was nice for 4 years, but was looking forward to getting back west.
When did you first get into computers? Like, how young were you?
Wow, I think, how old are you?
36, 35, okay. Almost 36.
I'm 38, almost 39. But do you remember TRS-80s?
Yeah.
Back in the day? So
I didn't use them, but
so these were made by Radio Shack, and back in the day, the manual that came with it, like there were these basic programs in the back, and I didn't know what I was doing except
you write them out, right?
It was literally just transcribing them, and
that's what I did too.
Stuff,
I did that with the Commodore 64. I made a balloon float around the screen. Except I'd always get errors, and it wouldn't tell you what line the error was on. And it was just really awkward because you have to go through every single line and see where you made the mistake.
Yeah, so that was, I think, I don't know, in elementary school or something, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew that if I typed these things in, and then I also remember that I could save the programs onto cassette tapes, and then load them back up.
Backup tapes? Like the old...
No, they were literally cassette tapes, like, you know, what you would make a mix on back in the day, and just normal cassette tapes. And that was kind of my start, and then over time kind of figured out a little, just, you know, through trial and error.
Were you kind of like, for me personally, there was a point in my life when I was much younger where I didn't leave the house. I was like so addicted to computers and technology that I was constantly indoors on my computer, and like to the point where I can remember my parents being like, get outside and play. Like, did that ever happen to you, where you were just stuck indoors?
Yeah, I think for me the turning point was, I'm trying to think when it was. It was probably around early high school or late middle school. Back then there were these things called BBSs, bulletin board systems. We've talked about this before, and that was kind of and for those who may not know, that was basically kind of the predecessor to the internet.
It was the best thing ever.
And we would,
did you host your own?
Eventually I hosted my own and actually learned this programming language called Pascal, and actually wrote my own BBS system. Awesome. And then I was actually inspired by, I heard a story of a 16-year-old kid who had written his own BBS system, and I think that's actually what really got me into programming, was like, well, thinking that, if a 16-year-old kid could do it, then maybe, you know, I could learn it too.
So what software did you run?
Turbo Pascal, or what?
For the BBS software?
Well, eventually ran...
It was like Wildcat or PC Board. You eventually wrote
the one that the 16-year-old kid wrote was called Quick BBS.
I remember Quick BBS.
And then I wrote basically a clone of it called eBBS. E meaning the enhanced bulletin boards.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was clever.
Did you take that then and go into college and study computer science in college?
Yeah, but although that was probably more born out of laziness than anything else, it was like, I already know computer programming, so I might as well major in computer programming. I also did things like, I speak Mandarin with my parents, so I took a Chinese class in college. And
now you said in your book, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm relying on that data I have in my head because I read it. Your mom was pretty hardcore. Like, she, as far as like forcing you, like the piano and several other things, right?
Yeah, definitely growing up, typical Asian American parents. Like, I remember during the summer, they'd make me practice an hour of piano, an hour of violin, an hour of trumpet or French horn, and then, you know, study for SATs in middle school.
Were they excited? Were they excited that you were into computers, or no?
I think not really. I think they were kind of indifferent about it, and the whole BBS thing, I think they just thought it was a phase.
So at what point, everybody's different when I talk to these different entrepreneurs about what point in time they realized that they could do something on their own to make money. For me, I don't know the first time that I wrote a little tiny piece of software that I was going to sell as shareware, and that was kind of like the first time I realized, like, wow, I can just write this once and sell it 1,000 times. Like, what was that moment for you?
No, I think I was definitely inspired by the idea of it, and I think eBBS was shareware.
So you charged for it?
Or maybe, I forget what they called it back then, but it was optional, and no one opted in. So
you never made $1 off that?
So I never made any. So I never really believed it. And so after college, I went to work for Oracle for 5 months, but then found out kind of the whole corporate lifestyle wasn't really for me, and so left Oracle and had been kind of doing web design with my college roommate, where he was doing the actual design and I was making sales calls, and thought that it was more about being entrepreneurial, not about being technical. And so that was kind of the plan. And then I think it wasn't. I remember actually when I resigned from Oracle. This was back in '96, early '96. My boss was actually really excited for me, and I was dreading like resigning. And he was excited for me, and I thought it was just really weird. And he's like, "Oh, do you have this startup that you're joining?" Blah, blah. And I'm like, "Sure." And
did you have a startup that you were joining,
no,
or you just wanted to quit?
No. Yeah, I just wanted to quit.
So you just knew, what was it about corporate life?
But I wasn't really.
Because many people would consider that to be an awesome job, right? You get a college degree, you got your CS degree, you go in. Oracle, obviously, still an amazing company. Like,
I think I was just really bored and not really feeling like I was doing anything, and so I left to kind of continue this web design thing, but really didn't have a startup idea. And my first kind of real startup company was actually born out of sheer boredom, because we were doing web design, and then it was like, let's try an idea, and that's for my first company, LinkExchange. That's where the idea that came about, but originally it was really probably more of a hobby than anything else. But that just kind of
let's talk about LinkExchange for a minute, because I was a user back in the day. I've told you this before.
Oh, that's right.
A long time ago, like when we talked about it. LinkExchange was awesome. No one had come up with a banner exchange like swap program back then. I think you were the first. There was a lot of clones after that.
Yep.
But like, how did you come up with that idea, and explain, like, it was a big deal back then?
Yeah, well, back then, so backtrack to '96. Back then, if you had any advertising, it's like the complete opposite of today. If you had any advertising on your website, that meant that your website had made it. Like, it was kind of like a validation thing.
Right, because there was no Google AdSense. There wasn't like an easy way to drop in.
Like, if someone's willing to pay to have ads on your website, then you must be in.
I put fake banner ads up on my site to make it look like people were paying, so that they would come in and hopefully want to buy ads on my site, because they're like, other people are buying ads on his site.
Yeah, so it was this interesting time where, like, if you had ads on your site, you must be a cool website, and then at the same time, there are all these websites and a lot of personal homepages and just like the Madonna fan site or whatever that wanted to get more traffic, but really couldn't afford to buy traffic.
Because you'd have to buy on like Yahoo or like
and you'd have to buy probably $5,000 or $10,000 at a time. There wasn't the Google AdWords thing. And so basically the idea was, like, if you're running, what was your website?
I don't want to say what it was, because people will look it up on the old Wayback Machine. And it was just a wallpaper site. It was stupid.
What do you mean?
It made a decent amount of money. It was wallpapers, like, like everyone wanted a different wallpaper. Where they're like, remember on Windows?
On their, like a screensaver?
Yeah, but no, not a screensaver, but the wallpaper's like behind your desktop, like a picture of ocean.
But you mean a virtual, not literally.
Right, not real wallpaper. I'm talking computer wallpaper. I didn't sell physical wallpaper to people back then. That would be a horrible. Like,
you seemed embarrassed, so I didn't.
No, could you imagine? I'm like, I was in the physical wallpaper business for a while online.
That probably
it just didn't
would have
work
been
out.
huge, actually.
Yeah. But, I just had wallpapers and stuff like that, and it was a site called mywindows.com. and it was about customizing your copy of Windows. And so
So my personal homepage was the Bomberman site. Bomberman was this Nintendo game, and so that was actually the very first official member of LinkExchange. And so the idea would be like, you've got your wallpaper site, I've got my Bomberman site, and neither of us can afford to buy advertising, and no one's going to buy advertising on our site. So what if you and I both joined this network? And so basically it would cause real ads to start appearing on your website, in my website, and 100 or 1,000 other websites. And then basically what ends up happening, what our system did was all the websites would start advertising each other. But it was there was a whole credit system.
Right.
So
it was like a 2-to-1 display.
Yeah,
for every 2 ads I displayed, it would display one of my ads on somebody else's site.
Right. So basically, if you got, say, 1,000 visitors a day or 1,000 page views a day, then you would earn 500 credits, which meant you would be advertised 500 times elsewhere on the network, sometimes on my website, sometimes on others. And then when you actually added up the whole system, then that meant, like, say, in the early days, if there were 10 million page views a day or ad views a day, 5 million of that would be kind of exchanged amongst the members themselves, and then we'd have this extra inventory of 5 million ads, basically.
You could actually sell
and then we go to someone like Toyota or whoever and say, hey, we can actually put you instantly on what eventually became 1 million websites. And kind of instantly, and there were cool ideas like, imagine if you were Miller Lite and at 5 p.m. every day, like it would be the equivalent of if you were driving along the highway and suddenly at 5 p.m. Every billboard suddenly said it's
beer time, Miller time,
happy hour, Miller time or whatever. So basically, we made our money off of the extra inventory and selling those to companies. And our pitch actually was that, and at the time, so we eventually ended up selling the company to Microsoft, but at the time, we actually had more reach than Yahoo at the time across our entire network, which was pretty cool.
That's crazy. I mean, so explain, like, this is your first startup. You code this yourself or someone else?
Initially, yeah, the first probably year or so.
You bought server space on some shared server somewhere?
No, we had our own.
You had your own server?
Before. And actually, forget even servers, like the internet connections back then, like we were working out of our apartment. Well, eventually we needed a T1 and we looked into T3, which was like $45,000 a month.
Right.
And
how fast was the T3? It was T1 was 1.54.
Yeah, T3,
4 megs?
Something like that, yeah.
4 megs a second, something like that?
I don't know. But
what was it?
45.
Was it 45?
Oh.
That's still really fast.
But it was
T3s were expensive.
T1s anyways, we couldn't
expensive.
afford it. Yeah, I think T1s, now that I'm thinking back on it, I want to say
it was 1.54 up and down, right, for T1
a month?
Yeah.
I don't know, but something, like what you get out of your cable modem today for $50 a month.
Right.
Way more expensive.
So you built this, you launched it, you had insane growth. Microsoft, how old are you at this point?
In 98, I think I was 24.
So Microsoft comes along, and how much did they purchase the company for?
Well, they ended up, the final price was $265 million, but what a lot of people don't know is actually the real reason why we ended up selling the company. And the real reason was because it just ended up not being a fun place to work at anymore, and the company culture went completely downhill. I remember in the early days back in '96 when it was 5 or 10 of us, it was a lot of fun. We were hiring friends and friends of friends. And then none of us, I guess, really knew any better to pay attention to company culture, and not everyone we hired was actually great for the culture, and a lot of them were actually bad for the culture. And by the time we got to 100 people, I mean, I myself dreaded getting out of bed in the morning to go to my own company, which is kind of a weird feeling.
So how did that happen? Was it all about culture, or was it about talent, or was it a mixture of both? Like, what happened? What did you do wrong?
I think it's just, I mean, we were fresh out of school, just didn't know what we were doing, and I think I'd say one of the lessons that actually you would think we'd learned the first time, but kind of repeats itself throughout history, is actually just not having enough self-confidence, right? Like thinking, oh, if we hire this external person that has this great resume, then they'll be great, and it feels weird, but they must know more than we do. And I think one of the lessons we learned through LinkExchange was actually, if you're one of the co-founders, you probably know more about the business than someone that's just coming in from the outside. But we were young at the time and didn't know that.
So the culture is kind of off base. You're like, I just don't want to do this. I want to get out of this.
Yeah. Well, the culture. Culture wasn't even in our vocabulary at the time. It was more like, there are some people I don't like hanging around with, right? So
why not just let them go?
I think, at that. By the time we realized it, like, I wasn't CEO anymore, and so I wasn't really in a position to.
Why did you decide to? Because this is something I did as well. Like, why did you decide to give up the CEO title?
I think just assuming that, and this is not specific to the person that came in with the CEO title, but just assuming that, someone with more experience in whatever position, we need to hire a VP of marketing. Job. They must, if they've had 10 years experience, they must be able to do a better job. And so I'm not saying specifically whether it's a CEO or VP of marketing or head of whatever department. It's more just it's more, I guess, in the aggregate. If you make, and it actually doesn't take that many, but if you make enough bad hires in senior positions, then
it trickles downstream and kind of like So. You could have retired at this point.
Yeah, we got super lucky with the timing. This was back in '98 during the
You had a great sale.
Yeah.
But you decide to, so you're still living in the Bay Area.
Yep.
And then after you're done with that venture, like did you start Venture Frogs at that point?
Yeah, so Alfred, who was our VP of Finance at LinkExchange, and we knew each other from college, he and I formed an investment fund. Invested in about 20 or so different internet companies, and
this was in 99?
99. Mm-hmm. And
I remember your office right there next to the movie theater.
Yeah, well, that was also our lofts. Our
that's right. You had lofts over there as well.
Yeah. So, and one of those companies just happened to be Zappos. So I'm admiring your T-shirt.
Yes, this is actually your shirt out of your closet, to be honest. That's awkward now.
Well, what was awkward was the other T-shirt you said was really dirty.
It had some smudges on it.
It was fresh out of laundry.
It smelled amazing. So Zappos was one of the companies that you had invested in as an incubator. How did the rest of the investments go? Did they work out, or was investing your thing, or? 20 doesn't seem like enough to even really make a fund. Like, you need to have.
It was 20. I think actually it was maybe 27 companies, 27 million. And if I had to guess, I'd say probably a third broke even, a third went out of business, and a third made money. But I'd say at the end of the day, probably most of the return was from Zappos. Mm-hmm. And I think just throughout the course of investing, meeting new companies was actually really exciting, and you meet all these crazy entrepreneurs and get excited by them, and all these new ideas and so on. But then once all the money had been invested, then it got kind of boring. It was like, now we gotta, like, there wasn't.
Kind of sitting on the sidelines instead of actually.
Yeah, and I realized I really miss being a part of building something. Mm-hmm. And so within a year, ended up joining Zappos full time, and been with Zappos ever since.
And so they did. You come on as CEO at that point, or?
It was kind of just a gradual thing. Initially, just as an investor and an advisor, and then I think there was no official point where it was sounding like I'm CEO. It was just taking on more, responsibility over time.
What did you do differently? So it was your second time around, and obviously, I've been through the same thing. You learn a ton of things through every company that you launch. What were those things? What were those big key things that you brought forward into Zappos? I mean, you've clearly built an amazing culture there. Like, what are your learnings that you brought into that business?
Well, definitely the number one thing is the culture side of it, because I definitely didn't want to repeat the same mistake I had made at LinkExchange. And so from the beginning, company culture was always important. And myself and Fred interviewed everyone when we were still in San Francisco, basically until we couldn't do that anymore because there were too many employees to interview. But basically, we had this criteria of, yes, interview for the normal business technical stuff, but
do they meet the bar?
Right.
Technically.
So do the normal set of interviews, but then you kind of had this final test of is this someone I would choose to hang out with or grab a drink with? And if the answer was, if we weren't in business together, if the answer was no, then we wouldn't hire them.
So that goes against a lot of the things that, I've heard out there in the past. It's keep your work and personal relationships separate. That's kind of been a thing that's been stated out there. There should be this firewall between the two. But you went in and said, okay, it's very important that I can actually get along with this person. This is someone I can go out and have a beer with. Why was that so important to you?
I guess I have two answers to that. One is, yes, there are companies that focus on work-life separation or work-life balance, and at Zappos we really focus on work-life integration, and at the end of the day it's just life, so you might and especially if you spend so much time at work, you better hopefully enjoy the time that you're spending there and the people that you're with. So that's one answer. And then the other answer is, and I don't think the book existed at the time Zappos was founded, but Jim Collins, his book Good to Great, researched and looked at what separated the great companies in terms of long-term financial performance from just the good ones or mediocre ones, and found that the great ones had two important ingredients that separated them from just the good ones or mediocre ones. And one of them was that they all had strong cultures. And we formalized the definition of our culture into, we have 10 core values at Zappos. And one of the actually really interesting things I found from the research was that it actually doesn't matter what your values are. What matters is that you have them and that you align the organization around them. And the power actually comes from the alignment, not from the actual values. So there's no judgment in the values. And so we're not out there telling people, oh, you should adopt the Zappos values and culture and so on, because actually that would probably not work in most cases. Our message is more, you should figure out what your values are and then align the entire organization around them. So
do you hold everyone to those values? I mean, the tricky situation I feel like you might run into when you have a lot of friends that you go grab, that you hire in, not friends, but people that you will become your friends and people that you'll go have a beer with. I've seen professionally relationships degrade into a casual kind of relationship because you're friends with that person. Right. And then oftentimes that can mean kind of slippage at the workplace where someone's like, hey, I didn't complete that, but I was out drinking last night, with a friend, we were all buddies here, no big deal. And then the professional environment degrades because there's this friendship thing going on versus someone standing over you and being like, no, that should have been done yesterday and your ass is on the line because of it. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely go both ways. I think Fred, he and I joined Zappos at the same time, he probably had the best definition of a good manager, which was someone that you could fire and then still go grab a drink with afterwards. So you need to be able to do both, basically. Because the flip side of it is, and we actually encourage our employees to spend time hanging out with their direct reports or managers and so on outside the office, because what we found is that if they do that and develop those personal relationships, and we actually take the same philosophy with our vendors, and we work with over 1,000 different brands, is that once you have that personal connection, then back in the office or over the phone with your vendor, relationships are better, higher levels of trust, communication is better. You're willing to do favors for each other because you're doing favors not just for a business associate, but for a friend. And we survey our managers sometimes and ask them,
how much more productive or efficient is your team because of those things. And it's interesting because they give us answers like they're anywhere from 20% to 100% more productive, depending on the team.
So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that watch this show. It's primarily people that are either in the middle of starting something that they've already launched or thinking about starting something. Building a culture, first of all, go buy your book because it's freaking awesome. Outside of that, what are your 2 or 3 things that you would recommend to every startup? It's this is what I would repeat over and over again as far as launching a culture for the first time.
I'd say do it from the beginning, ideally. And ideally, if you're just one founder or 2 co-founders, just figure out what your personal values are and then just make those the corporate values. And that's the easiest path. And
so give me some examples of your values.
Well, our values at Zappos are, for example, be adventurous, creative, and open-minded, be humble, create a team and family spirit. And so it's not that other companies need those values, but those are the ones that are important to us and important to me personally.
How do you align people, though? How do you align people, create a team and family spirit? How do you align people around that value?
I think the easiest way is just hire people who care about that in the first place, regardless of, independent of the company.
Do you have tests for this? How do you?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where the role of the recruiting team is super, super important because they're actually the ones that do the screening for the core values at Zappos.
What's your screening like?
It evolves over time, and at the end of the day, it's actually more based on their gut than anything else because they learn over time what are the things that we may have missed, even though they gave all the perfect answers on paper. But there's also things like when we will pick up candidates from the airport in a Zappos shuttle, and then afterwards, the recruiting team will check in with the shuttle driver and ask how he or she was treated. And if he or she wasn't treated well, then we won't hire them, no matter how well their technical skills are. And so and actually we do. That's actually the whole be humble thing is probably the biggest roadblock in our candidates because there are a lot of smart, talented people that we know can make an immediate impact on our top or bottom line. But if they're egotistical or whatever, then we won't hire them.
Talk to me about the tough calls that you have to make. Let's say you bring someone in, they pass all your gut checks, they're working, 6 months go by, it's just not a good fit. How do you edit the team? How do you get rid of folks? How many chances do you give them?
We really leave that. There's no universal formula. We really leave that up to each manager. But before they actually start the actual job they were hired for, they go through 4 weeks of the exact same training that our call center employees go through, including going over company history, the importance of company culture.
Before they even start?
Yeah. And then they're actually on the phone for 2 weeks taking real calls from real customers.
So this could be a super senior level VP that you're bringing in, and you're you're going to work the call center for 2 weeks, so you know what it's like.
Well, and we've had senior VPs, candidates that have come through and said, oh, I know that's for everyone else, but I don't need to go through it, right? And then
you're actually, you're not hired.
You're you're right, you're not going through that. But 4 weeks is it's hard to fake 4 weeks of, actually, you can see whether they actually care about the customer or the culture.
And I really like something unique that I'd never seen done anywhere else, that you will actually pay people to quit.
Yeah. It initially, I think, started out. So basically, at the end of the first week of training, we tell people we'll pay them. I think it's up to $3,000 or $4,000 now to
just to walk away.
Just to walk away. Yeah.
So they accepted the offer. They get in the door, and you're here's $4,000. Just leave. And that's because you want someone that's super dedicated and that's really in it.
We don't want people that are there for a paycheck, and we don't want people that feel like they're trapped there. Some employees may be living paycheck to paycheck, and we want them to, if Zappos isn't the right fit for them, then, we want to help them on the way out.
How many people have taken you up on that?
I don't know the number, but percentage-wise, it's probably 2 or 3% each year.
Wow. And so that's at any time they can do that?
Anytime during the training.
Okay, during the training. But once they're in the system, then they can't just up and leave and get the cash.
No.
I see. So fast forward, I mean, Zappos has exploded. Acquisition, Amazon. You're now embarking on a whole new venture downtown here in Vegas. Talk to me about what you're doing and why.
So it's funny because we've been in Vegas for 9 years, and I'd say maybe 6 or 7 of those 9 years, we've actually been trying to find a place where we can put everyone under one roof, because company culture is so important to us. And right now, if you visited our offices in Henderson, which is a suburb of Vegas, we're spread amongst 3 different buildings, and people that work in the building at the top of the hill, they might as well be in Siberia, because people don't really run into each other or go up to that building that often. And so we thought getting everyone into one building was really important. We want employees to be colliding with each other, and we actually, in the building I'm in, the parking lot is actually behind the building, and the previous tenants let employees go in and out the back door and the side doors and so on. We actually lock those doors and force employees to the front in order to increase the number of collisions or serendipitous interactions amongst employees. And so, definitely if everyone's in a single building, then that'll happen more often. But for whatever reason, it's been surprisingly hard to find a place where we can house everyone under one roof and have enough land to expand upon. And then we announced I guess it was in end of 2010, so about almost 2 years ago, that we're actually taking over Las Vegas City Hall, or the old City Hall, which is right behind us.
Yep.
And the city literally just, they had plans, they were building a new City Hall, and they just moved out of this City Hall a few months ago. And there's enough land to expand upon. And the original thought was, let's build a dream campus. Like, we toured campuses like Apple and Nike and Google that have these amazing, beautiful campuses. Mm-hmm. But as we started thinking about it more, we realized that those campuses were great for employees, but were actually really insular and didn't really integrate or contribute to the community around them. Mm-hmm. And thought, what if we actually turned the whole idea of a campus inside out, and instead of just thinking of it as this kind of little bubble thing for ourselves, invest in the community and the ecosystem around it. In the long run, that would actually help us attract and retain more employees. And so it's almost more like an approach that's similar to NYU, where the campus blends in with the city and don't really know where one begins and the other ends. Mm-hmm. So think about, okay, what does that mean? And so that's actually, and we'll be moving into the City Hall in about 9 months now. And so formed a separate company called Downtown Project. It has a $350 million budget, and it's just privately funded by myself, Fred, and a couple other people. And the whole idea is, let's invest in the community, into small businesses, into other tech companies that help build up the tech ecosystem here, into arts and education, music, and so on. And the idea being, help create a place where you have everything to live, work, play within walking distance, mm-hmm. and make downtown Vegas the most community-focused large city in the world, and probably the place you would least expect it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, I remember, obviously, we've known each other for quite a while, and you first started telling me about this idea, and I thought it was a pretty big undertaking, pretty bold. And then every time I come and visit, just more and more is happening. Like, I just gave a talk here just probably, half hour ago, and there was 100 people in the room, like all tech people. Like, that wasn't the case in Vegas just a few years ago.
Yeah, so that's actually been the fastest growing part of everything that we're helping, accelerate.
It feels like Austin, Texas in a way. Like, do you think that Austin is something you're kind of striving for? Like local bars around, all walking distance, coffee shops with tech people in there, like...
Yeah, definitely the original idea was, let's make this in Austin, cross between Austin and San Francisco maybe. Right. But what's been really interesting is that we've taken on our own vibe and identity, and now we're actually like, no, we're not trying to be the next Silicon Valley, and we're not trying to be the next Austin, but and it's one of those things that's really hard to describe until mm-hmm. you actually come visit.
So I want to tell everyone that's watching this that, Vegas, you typically think of the Strip, the lights, the craziness, all that. This is like old school downtown Vegas, which is like, it's a lot of, it's off the Strip, it's off the main drag.
Well, and it's actually the non-gaming side of downtown Vegas.
Right. So it's like completely different.
Yeah, if anything, it's the anti-Strip. Right. Like if you go into any of these bars, coffee shops, restaurants, you have no idea you're in Vegas. there's no gaming, and people are really surprised. And I think the most surprising thing is that it's actually the most community-focused place I've ever lived. And I grew up in the Bay Area and lived in San Francisco and San Mateo and Marin County. And but I've never been to a place where the bar owners hang out in each other's bars just to support each other. And even if, and that's why we tell people to come visit. We actually have a whole bunch of furnished apartments actually in this high-rise set up as free hotel rooms for visitors, and when they come visit and stay for a couple of days, or some people stay for a week or two, it's actually enough time for them to become part of the community and start recognizing people, running into people, and experience this whole kind of accelerated serendipity concept that we're really focusing on.
So people watching this are going to say, okay, I make it out to Vegas for a tech conference or whatever else is going on. What are I've got a handful of spots that I know that I like right around here, but what are the main channels? Let's say there's somebody, it's programmers, I'm going to be in Vegas in a couple months. Obviously they don't have your cell phone number. How can they just get here to hang out? Where should they go? What should they be doing down in this area to experience this?
I would say, so we try to, most people when they come to Vegas come for this weekend or long weekend, and we actually encourage people to come during weekdays and check out what normal life is like here. Thursday nights, there's something called a Tech Jelly. That's 7 p.m. till midnight. That's when the tech community gets together at the local coffee shop, the Beat coffee shop.
The Beat.
Yeah, and then that's part of a larger building that's called Emergency Arts, and local artists and designers and architects, and there's even a film production studio in there. But I would say check out downtownproject.com.
Is there a calendar of events on there and things like that, or?
It's there's some events are listed on there, but a lot of it is just
hanging out,
super organic, and stuff just happens. And usually the cool thing, for your talk that you just gave, we have actually, so let me state the different websites. There's downtownproject.com, there's vegastechfund.com, and then there's downtownspeakerseries.com. And so you just gave a talk at the Downtown Speaker Series where we have people, just whoever happens to be town, we're like, hey, do you want to give a talk? That's literally what happened with you.
Right.
And you said, okay, and thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And it was, we didn't give much notice to everyone, but 100-something people showed up. And so those are the types of things that happen down here. And it's different every week. There's farmers market events, there's trivia night, there's First Friday, where it's an arts and music festival that we now run. And so there isn't one thing that you go to, but if you come for a few days, there's always going to be something going on. And that's part of what's really cool about everything here, is that it's so much of it is being organically driven.
Talk to me also, tell everyone about the arcade bar.
Oh yeah, so there's
this is the most amazing thing ever.
There's a place called Insert Coins,
Insert Coins,
and I think it's been open for a little over a year. And basically, it has the '80s arcade games all the way up to
all the '80s arcade games in there. We gotta go check this out tonight, Graham. It's awesome.
All the way up to whatever the latest Xbox, and I'm not a video game player, but
you can get drinks and you can hang out there. And I went and checked it out. It's pretty awesome. It's right in the center of all this stuff that's going on. So, well, thanks for being on the show. I think that this is the first time I've come to Vegas. I know you've had this vision for a long time. This is the first time I've been here where I can see it all coming together. It feels like now is the time. And I think with the cost of living that is out here, it's so much cheaper to live than, say, San Francisco or the Bay Area in general. It's this is a great place to start something new.
Yeah,
and you're doing a tech fund as well, right? You're actually funding tech startups.
Yeah, and our goal is to fund at least 100 tech startups that are based out of downtown Vegas. And
that was, what was the website for that again?
VegasTechFund.com.
Cool.
And but it's not just tech. There's a fashion incubator and fashion scene that's being started here, and there's a makerspace, and there's all these kind of creative class type of things and entrepreneurial stuff coming together, and it's pretty exciting. And the funny thing is, Zappos hasn't even moved down here yet, and I actually think that Zappos doesn't even have to. We definitely are, but it was interesting that I think it was
because that's going to bring how many thousand people down to this area?
That'll bring well over 1,000 people down here initially, and then we're still continuing to grow. But I think what's been really interesting is it was the announcement or the idea that Zappos was moving down here that maybe got other companies interested. Take-Two, I think they make Grand Theft Auto. They just announced they're, I think, moving 150 employees down here to downtown Vegas. And so I'm starting to run into all these different tech startup companies, and both small and large, where we're not even part of it, and they're just coming on their own. And so that's pretty exciting.
It's really cool to see this actually happening and getting off the ground. It's awesome. So cool. Well, thanks for being on the show, and we will definitely come back and check in with you again, like in a year or so, and just like
check out the shipping container park. Should be done by then. The speakers theater, actually 2 speakers theaters for the TED-like talks. There's in a ton of restaurants and bars.
Awesome.
Fun.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah.